What's going on, guys? Welcome to the new year. And with New Year's always comes with new resolutions, and I've been seeing, at least on like the forums and Facebook groups, that a lot of people are really writing down trying to catch that big fish that they've been looking for. May it be a double digit or a state record or just a fish that is really big where they are. So it's always nice to see that when it comes down to swim bait fishing, there are still those guys that want to go out there and try and catch the biggest fish that they possibly can. So today we're not going to be talking about rods, reels, line, and baits. We're going to be talking about the 5 things that I think are really necessary that you might even need in your pursuit of trying to catch these giant fish. Now, need is nowadays such a very strong word. Obviously, you don't need anything to go out there and really catch giant fish, but kind of in today's social media realm where a lot of guys, including obviously myself, like to share, what they catch and what they catch them on. And this whole breakdown for guys on social media, may it be Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, whatever you use, there is this wanting to share things. And in social media, it's obviously made it really easy to share people's catches and what they're catching them on and their experiences through swimbait fishing. Now, there's also kind of a darker side to the social media of the sharing aspect where you will see guys, they catch a fish and, they weighed it, it's like a 10 pound or whatever, but the photo's, really misleading. A lot of guys are talking a lot of trash, saying like, oh, that's only like a 5 pounder, this and that. So it seems like you almost need some of these items I'm going to pretty much be sharing with you guys today in order to not have everybody on your ass about certain things. So if you guys are ready, let's get right into today's video. Okay, so the first item that we're going to be talking about is one that I definitely think if you really are trying to chase after big fish, you're trying to break a personal best, a state record, or anything like that, I think one of the most important things to have in your boat is a good scale. So a couple years ago, I went back and I brought a Brecknail scale, one of the best scales, portable scales out there on the market. I think it was like $75. It's an expensive scale, but it's one of the most accurate portable scales out there on the market, and I love this scale overall. Obviously, it does have its flaws. I heard that if you kind of get it wet or it's kind of damp where you are, this thing will short circuit on you and it won't be as accurate. So luckily enough, here in Arizona, it's super dry here, so the scale so far has worked for me perfectly fine. I always like this scale over some of the other ones, but obviously you don't need a Brecknail. You can always just go with one of those Berkeley ones. Those ones are good as well. Now, having a scale, it kind of goes back to the people being on your ass about certain things. A lot of guys nowadays, when they do catch a really big fish, they do have some documentation of the fish on the scale. One of the biggest things is, showing the scale and showing that you zeroed it out, and then when you put the fish on there, you actually show it to the camera and it shows the weight. Now, I haven't caught a fish big enough for that, unfortunately, but it seems like once you get in really giant size, 10, 11, 12, 13 and up, it does seem to be more important for people, because when you have people on your ass about like, oh no, there's no way that's an 11, that's probably like a 9, the easiest way to debunk is literally just to post a screenshot or a photo that you took of the fish on the scale, post it, and then just leave it alone. Most of those guys will, tuck their tails between their legs, and they're like, oh, well, the picture was deceiving, this whole 9 yards. So just having a scale nowadays, especially on social media, is definitely a huge one that will kind of relieve some of the pressure that you might get from certain people that are jealous of your catch. Now, the next one is, I think, kind of overlooked personally, but I think it's definitely a huge important one personally to me, that I have high quality dikes and pliers. Obviously, these are super rusted, as you guys could probably tell, but I love this 1-2 combo. Obviously, I use my pliers to change out hooks on split rings, obviously unhooking fish, and I like having a good quality pair of pliers, because if you get some cheap ones, like I have some in my truck right now that are literally garbage at cutting line, so it really makes me mad that I can't cut simple 20 pound. I'm able to cut line super well with this thing. I'm able to use these pliers for pretty much anything that I would need to, and they're high quality. Same thing goes with the dikes. A lot of times I'm trying to cut braid, or I'm trying to cut a hook or something like that, and a good pair of dikes will do those things perfectly fine. Don't cheap out on pliers or dikes. It goes a long way. I mean, I remember going up to Minnesota with my buddy Phoenix. He doesn't have the best pair of pliers and dikes, and it honestly can be really frustrating trying to change hooks or unhook fish or cut braid, and it's not fun when you don't have the right equipment. So definitely not the biggest thing, but personally to me, I think having high quality pliers or dikes will go a long way and not frustrate you when trying to do things. Okay, going over to the next thing, I think this one is pretty important, especially if you are chasing after giant fish, and that is obviously a net. Now, growing up, I would fish urban ponds, and even when I would walk around at the urban ponds, I would bring a net. I would literally just throw the net between my back and my backpack, and it would stay there. Just because you just never know, whether or not we were going to finally catch that giant fish out of the urban spot. And I remember I was fishing with my buddy David, and we finally ran into probably the biggest fish in that pond, a 9-pounder, and he hooks it on the slide swimmer, and as soon as I net it, dude, the bait comes flying out. And so I'm like, dude, if I hadn't brought the net that day, that fish legit would have just came off, and we would have never known how big that fish was. So even if you are, pounding the shores, it is kind of a pain in the ass to lug around a net. That's why I try to go with the lightest net, but with a big enough hoop that I know if I was going to, land a fish, that it's going to be big enough for that fish to be in there. Obviously, you don't really need it, but that one time urban fishing, it definitely paid off to have a net that day. And obviously, if you have a boat, having a good net will go a long way for you, especially if you are really chasing after those giant fish. I know some guys will just, they only boat flip fish. It doesn't matter if it's a 9, 10, 11, they're going to boat flip that fish. More power to them. I've accidentally boat flipped a 9-pounder too, but it's not something that I would regularly do because I have definitely tried to boat flip fish before, and either my line snaps or the fish shakes off before I can get in the boat. So it's like, darn. But out there on the water, there are times that I'm like, oh, I probably should have just flipped that fish because it wasn't that big, or it's something like that. But it's kind of all judgment. But for sure, when that fish first comes up and I kind of get a glance of how big it is, I will be like, okay, this fish is, pretty fired up, so I think I'm going to grab the net. A lot of times I'll hook a fish out and I kind of just bring it in, and I just go with the momentum and I swing it in the boat. So it's just 50-50 on it, but I definitely recommend, if you guys are really chasing after those giant fish, getting a good net. Now, a good net will pretty much come down to the size of the hoop, how deep the net is, and then the handle length. So this one I got from Bass Pro Shops. I think it was like $35 to like $50. It's got a long enough handle on here to where I don't feel like it's too short, where I've got good extension when I'm trying to get a fish in it. It's got a big enough hoop for the fish that we're chasing after for. And then the net is deep enough so a fish, when it gets in there and I'm just kind of like chilling out, I've just got the fish in there, it has enough room to where it can sit in the water deep enough to where it's getting oxygen. So just having a good net goes a long way. Obviously, you guys can go with some of like those Promar nets that are super expensive, but they're really nice. I know my buddy Manny Chi, he used to have one of those super long ones with like giant hoop. I think they were like a salmon net. The net was like 5 feet long. It was ridiculous, but it worked for him. Get a good quality net. It's going to go a long ways. Get something with maybe like that rubber coating, so when, you got a fish on a glide bait or whatever and there's a bunch of treble hooks, you can get the bait out and get back to fishing as fast as you possibly can. So getting a good net will definitely go a long way. Or if you just like boat flipping giant fish, keep going for it, Okay, so the fourth thing that we're going to talk about is, I think, a super important one. Like, this one is definitely one of, I think, the most important one that you can have in your boat. It's not really for, justifying a catch or proving something. It's not like that. It's really just something to use that I use almost every single time I go out fishing, and that is just a bait knocker. Now, this is a brand new one that I just got from Frank at Toothy Fisherman. I will leave a link in the description below if you guys want to get these. They're legit, only like, I think this came out to $33 after shipping. I am telling you right now, you need one of these, whether or not you're fishing glide baits, whether or not you're fishing baits on the bottom. I can't tell you how many times I've used a bait knocker and got a bait back. Now, it doesn't work 100% of the time. It probably works 85% of the time, but you snag a Huddleston or a Batesmith or any beta like that, and you get it back, it already pays for itself. I mean, the rope was probably $10. I got like the highest rated rope, 100 feet just in case, and this is it. I use this so much, especially during the winter when I'm fishing deep ledges and my bait kind of gets hung up on whatever it is down there, either cables or stuck between a rock or a fish habitat. A lot of times I'm able to get my bait back just because I have one of these, a bait knocker. It cost me $30 to get, and it pays for itself. I mean, this is the one that I had before. I literally just beat it up, and I kind of smashed down the ring so I can use it kind of if I see a floater, shove the weight down the fish's mouth. I used it on like a 7-pounder a couple weeks back. Worked just perfectly fine, but as you can tell, super rusted, super beat up. But I've had that one for years, and it was just about time to get a new one. The guy makes some, I think, like once every few months, and they're cheap. So definitely check them out. If you guys fish from a boat, it definitely helps. Now, if you're fishing from shore, you might want to get something that's a little bit lighter. They do make some extended poles that can go out as well. It's just definitely a bummer if you're shore fishing and it's way out there and you're snagged. A lot of times you will lose it, or you either go swimming or you get like a kayak or something like that to try and get it back. But if you're in a boat, a bait knocker will save you so many baits. I've snagged so many different baits, dude, from glide baits to soft baits, like you name it, I've snagged it, and for the most part, I get them back. There are just some times when you don't get it back, and that's just how the game goes, but having that thing in the boat means that I can fish my bait in some of the nastiest stuff that I can find and know, like, hey, if it gets snagged, I have a pretty good shot on getting my bait back. And I'm throwing it in there with that confidence because a lot of guys won't throw their bait up in that snags or in those areas that are really nasty because, well, they don't want to lose their bait. With the comfort of having a bait knocker in the boat, I can just bomb, you know, let's say a Magnum, a $100 soft bait into some nasty cables or fish habitats. And I feel it kind of get hung up in there, but you have to do that nowadays to get, you know, bites that you're looking for. So having a bait knocker, 100%, I think you really need one if you're really serious into trying to catch the biggest bass that you can. Now, the last thing that I think you're probably going to need, especially in today's social media range, is, well, what this thing is, what I'm filming with, a camera. May it be your cell phone, may it be like an actual camera, a GoPro, something that documents what you're doing. Like if anybody has any doubts of who I am and what I'm doing, I have picture proof. I've got cast to catch. I've got all these certain things that will just prove that, okay, like this guy's fine. He's always, you know, posted cast to catches and photos and all these things. It just makes you more legit. So if you do happen to catch a really giant bass, people won't automatically assume like, yo, something fishy is going on with this guy. And all you need is a camera. I mean, it doesn't matter whether or not you lay it down on a rock or whatever and you kind of do the selfie, you know, just something to document that what you're doing is legit, you know. And I mean, you look at Mike Long, unfortunately, I mean, he never really posted any casts to catches, and there's reasons for that, you know. So it is what it is type of thing, but I definitely think in today's society, you do need some type of picture proof. And sometimes even that isn't good enough for people. I mean, you go back through some of Butch Brown's videos, dude, he goes to great lengths to prove that the dude's like legit, where he's got like Bassmaster magazines, like a monthly issue, and it's like, here is the monthly issue. So that means that, you know, it just came out or whatever. This is it. The date. He's got the fish. Like, he just tries to make it as legit as he possibly can, and it's all through the camera. So I definitely think you don't obviously need some giant DSLR or mirrorless camera for this. Just a simple GoPro and your camera should do just fine. Now, kind of not like a need for sure, but just kind of one that I definitely realized that I wish I had earlier in life, especially when I was catching more fish than I do now, and that's, you know, just a measuring board. I mean, this is just working class zero measuring board. The first one that I got was a hard board on like the skateboard with the plywoods. I still have one in the boat somewhere. But just having a board just to get measurements of fish, it doesn't need to prove anything. I just think that having a board, when I put fish on a board, may it be an 18-inch fish up to a 24, 25-inch fish, and I weigh it, I'm like, okay, so if I catch like a 23-inch fish, I can probably judge how big that fish is going to be. If somebody posts up a picture and they're like, oh, I caught this 11-pounder and it's like a 22-inch fish, it's like, I don't know, not a lot of 22-inch fish can weigh 11 pounds. I mean, unless you're on Biwa, some of those fish can be like that. But for the most part, having a board and really seeing how big some of these fish are, lengthwise, girthwise, it'll go a long distance. I mean, my personal best, I wasn't able to put it on the board. To this day, I'm kind of curious on how long that fish actually was. I think it was like a 24.5-inch fish, but nowadays, I like having a board to see just how long some of these fish are that I catch. It's definitely not a need, but if you guys like kind of geeking out about fish dimensions and how big a fish needs to be a certain size, definitely get one of the boards. They're readily available nowadays. So, alright guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have good luck this year. Hopefully I can catch more fish this year personally myself. If you guys have any New Year's resolutions, let me know what they are down in the comments below. I will leave links to some of the items that I talked about here in the description below if you guys wanted to check them out, of course. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, go out there and chase your dreams.